I'm so excited that you are here. We're going to be wrapping up our series that we started about a month ago called The Harvest. And what we've been looking at in this series is this passage of scripture where Jesus uses this illustration by saying the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And what Jesus means in this illustration is he's saying there's people all around you. There's people all around you that are hurting, that are going through something, that need love, that need compassion, that need people to go to them with the love and compassion that God has for us and to take it to them. Their harvest is plentiful. There are people all over the place. The problem is there's not enough workers. There's not enough people going into the field, going to their neighbors, going to their family members, going to their friends, going to their coworkers to show them that love and to show them that compassion. And what we've looked at the past few weeks is that you are in a unique spot to make an impact on somebody in a way that nobody else can, that God has created you on purpose and for a purpose. That God has placed you in a unique spot to go into the harvest, to make an impact on somebody in a way that nobody else can. And the challenge from this series is to go to the people that are hurting in our life, to go to the people that are lost in our life, to go to the people that need love, that need compassion, that need grace, that need truth. And today we're going to be wrapping this series up. And the way I want to end it is I want to end it with a challenge that will kind of help us live what we've looked at the past 3 weeks out in our life. It's not the only way we can live it out, but I think it's a good way that we can. And I want to do this by looking at food. Specifically, I want to do this by taking and comparing the meals that we eat today with the meals that Jesus ate 2,000 years ago. So we'll get to that in a minute, but I just want you to think back to when you were a kid. Think back to the meals that you ate. Think back to the traditions that you had. Where did you eat the meals? Who did you eat the meals with? What were like the favorite meals, the fancy meals, the meals you looked forward to each and every year? What kind of meals did you eat growing up? For me, Monday nights in my home growing up was always breakfast for dinner. We were never really a big family that ate breakfast for breakfast, but we would regularly eat breakfast for dinner almost every Monday night. My dad would work late, my mom and I would cook pancakes or waffles or something like that. Breakfast for dinner almost always happened on Monday nights. On Tuesday nights, we'd go out, the whole family, we'd go out to a restaurant, we'd eat together. Wednesday night and Thursday night were kind of just normal nights where we'd sit around the table and share a meal together. Friday night, my parents would often get away for a date night. Saturday night, a lot of times, especially in the summer, we'd eat a meal with my grandparents. And then Sunday night was one of my favorite meals because that was pizza night. We'd go order pizza from our favorite local pizza joint, and then we'd often eat pizza and watch America's Funniest Home Videos. I loved Sunday night as a kid. More often than not, meals for me growing up were family time. They were eaten around a table, or Sunday nights they were sometimes eaten in front of the TV, but it was family time. That's what meals were. And I know that trend is fading fast. Today, often meals are one of two things. They're about what's comforting and convenient. What can we get in our bodies really fast? What can we cook really fast? We got busy schedules. We're go. So we just got to eat. Or some people, they eat for nutrition. They count the calories, they look at what's in the meal, and they're eating to fuel their body. They're eating so that they can accomplish with their body whatever it is that they're going after. Meals are much different today. We eat by ourselves. We eat in the car. We eat in front of a TV. We eat what's convenient. We eat what will give us energy. We eat what's good for us. And this was much different than the meals in Jesus' day. See, in Jesus' day, you always ate meals with others, but it wasn't just your family. You see, meals in Jesus' day weren't about getting the right nutrients. It wasn't even really about the food. It was about the people. It was about who you were eating with. It was a way of developing and maintaining your social status. It was a way of gaining more power. It was a way of setting the boundaries. You see, meals were often social and political and religious tools for moving up and down the social ladder. And what this did was it created this culture of the haves and the have-nots. You had the elites who would only share meals with people who could benefit them, people who could provide something for them. They'd throw these extravagant parties so people would look at them and be like, wow, that person is incredible. See, these meals were often a way of jockeying your position. You're always looking for that meal that you could go to with that person that was more prestigious than you, so you could move up the social ladder. And you're always trying to avoid eating with that person because that person might knock you down a few pegs. You see, this was the world that Jesus entered into. This was what meals were used for in Jesus's day. And one of the things that got him in so much trouble is he totally disregarded these social rules. He totally disregarded the social norms for who you would eat with. You see, in Jesus' day, meals were used to get something. You would go to a meal to get something, not the food, not the nutrients, but you would go to get something from somebody. You'd go to get more power, to get more social status. You'd go to impress others. They were used to get something. But one of the things that got Jesus in so much trouble is that he used meals to give something. He used meals to give something. We're going to look at this passage in the Bible that Jesus does just that. So if you would turn to your Bibles to Matthew chapter 9 or flip there on your phones, we're going to be kind of going through this passage in about 3 different sections and looking at how Jesus used this meal not to get something, but to give something, and how those around him just couldn't understand. So as you're turning there, let me just kind of set up a little bit of what's happening in this chapter. Jesus in Matthew chapter 9 is kind of in the beginning stages of his ministry. And he's going from place to place and he's teaching, he's performing miracles, and he's starting to put together like his core group, his disciples. He's starting to recruit them and call them. And these are key people that are going to play a role in his ministry. And things are starting to get going. And that's exactly what's happening here. Jesus has just performed a teaching or a miracle and done some teaching, and now he's walking away. He's done with that. He's walking away, and he happens to walk by Matthew, the author of this book. He walks by him, and this is what happens. Check this out. Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. As Jesus went on from there, from his miracles, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Jesus says, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. See, Matthew was a tax collector. It's a little detail that's in there, but it's a really, really important detail. A really, really important detail, because our minds, when we think of a tax collector, we tend to think of the IRS. We think of this season that we're in right now, right? The tax collecting season where we have to file all these forms and go through all this process. But believe it or not, our system today is much more orderly and fair than in the first century. It's much more orderly than fair than what Matthew did. Being a tax collector was not some sought after position. You see, today, you pay what you owe and you get back what you overpay. You might not think it's fair. You might think there's a better system, and that might very well be true, but it's much better. It's much more fair than Jesus' day. You see, in Jesus' day, they lived in Israel, in the Palestinian area, and the Romans came in and they conquered Israel. And then they set up their own unique tax system. And what they did was actually really quite genius. They went to the locals and they recruited them. They said, "Hey, you want to be a tax collector for the Roman government?" And they found these people that knew the area, they knew the people, they knew the customs, they knew the lingo, and they made them tax collectors. They didn't put their own tax collectors in place. They put locals in charge. And their job, these tax collectors' job, was to collect the required tax from the people. Maybe it's the fish, a portion of the fish that were caught from the sea, or a portion of the grain that was harvested from the field, whatever. They were supposed to collect a portion of the tax and then send it back to the Roman Empire. Now, this tax amount was already pretty high. It was already pretty steep, but the tax collectors were allowed to supplement their income by taking an extra amount for themselves. You see, the Roman government, they didn't care after they got their share. Once you sent them what they were due, they didn't care what you did. So these tax collectors were allowed to take a portion off, kind of supplement their income. And what often happened was this led to a common practice that these guys, these tax collectors, would take far beyond what was fair. And then they'd go and live these extravagant lives at the cost of their friends, of their neighbors, of their fellow countrymen. They were getting rich by extorting their own people. So it's fair to say that tax collectors, or Matthew, didn't have many friends, didn't have many fans. He would have been seen as a traitor because not only was he working for the enemy, the people that were occupying and oppressing them, the Romans, but he was also extorting his own people. They were considered traitors, and that's Matthew. That's Matthew. He would have likely, with Jesus, as Jesus walked by that day and all the people that were following, he would have likely been known by those other people. They would have likely kind of sneered at him, not had many good thoughts about him. So when Jesus stops and talks to them, they would have been a little shocked because they didn't hold him in high esteem. And that's what makes Jesus' invitation so shocking. Because Jesus isn't just telling a person to follow him, he's telling a tax collector who were considered like the worst of the worst. Like if you have like a really bad sinner, like the tax collectors are even below the worst of the worst sinners. And Jesus says, come, follow me. And Matthew does in an instant. Now, it's likely that Matthew knew who Jesus was. It's likely that Matthew had even heard Jesus teach before, but at the first invitation to follow him, he leaves his tax collector's booth and goes and follows Jesus. And if that weren't shocking enough, what happens next is even more shocking. You see, Matthew invites Jesus over for dinner. And remember, meals in Jesus' day were used to get something. And what Jesus is doing by going to this meal would have been considered social suicide. And what we're going to see is we're going to see Jesus in this next portion of this passage. He's going to eat this meal with Matthew and all these sinners. And the religious leaders, the Pharisees, are going to look at him and think, what is he doing? They just can't understand what Jesus is doing. So let's continue on in Matthew chapter 9, verse 10. It says this, well, Jesus was having dinner. He's sharing a meal at Matthew's house. Many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and the disciples. So picture this. Jesus, a religious leader in his own right, is eating with the worst of the worst. Verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, the religious leaders, when they saw this, they asked Jesus' disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? See, I don't think we understand how truly shocking this would be. And here's an example. I still don't think it fully encapsulates it. I'm not trying to be political by saying this, but this would be the equivalent of like if you woke up tomorrow and you found out like Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump like had a meal together and laughed late into the evenings and just had an incredible time. You would think it's probably some kind of satire or not true because it would just be so shocking. We just couldn't wrap our heads around how two people so different could get along. And so in this passage, what happens is Matthew takes Jesus home and he does what's honorable for him. It's honorable to throw a party for somebody in somebody's honor. So Matthew is placing Jesus in this place of honor. And he invites all his friends, but the problem is, who's his friends? Nobody else will hang out with him because he's considered a traitor. He's considered a sinner. So Matthew is stuck with hanging out with other tax collectors and other sinners. So he brings all these people over who are considered like the least of the least, the worst of the worst. Matthew brings them all over for this party. And the religious leaders are looking at this. And they're under the mindset you use meals to get something, to move up the social ladder, to gain power. And they just can't understand this. And they go to the disciples and say, why does your teacher do this? Why is he eating with these people? They just can't comprehend it. It's almost as if they're expressing like concern, like, does he not know? Does he not know who they are? Does he not know that he's like committing social suicide? Does he not know that eating with these people isn't going to look good? Does he not know that people are probably going to stop following him if he eats with these people? They just can't understand what he's doing. You see, the religious thought Jesus was bringing himself down. But what Jesus was doing is he saw this meal as an opportunity to give something to these people. See, these people have been ignored for years. They've been cast aside. Some of them rightfully so, right? They've done some pretty bad things. They were traitors. They were sinners. They screwed up their life, but Jesus had something for these people. He wanted to give love and compassion to the people that the religious leaders wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. And Jesus is going to them and loving them and showing compassion on them. And the Pharisees, the religious, just can't get it. They look at it and they say, why waste your time? Those people have nothing to offer. And Jesus is saying, you just don't get it. You don't understand. I'm not trying to get something from these people. I'm trying to give something to these people. And of course, while this is going on, Jesus knows. He knows what the religious leaders are thinking. He knows what they're saying. So let's continue on with verse 12 as he turns to them and starts interacting with them. Jesus says this, but when he heard it, when he heard about what the Pharisees were saying, what they were thinking, he said this, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick do. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I came to call out the righteous, I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. See, Matthew, he adds this quote from Hosea 6 that says, go and learn. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. This phrase, go and learn, it was a common phrase that rabbis, that teachers would use in the day when their student would come in and not know something they should. It's like they had studied this topic for months and months and months. It should have been common knowledge now to these students, but the students still didn't do it. They were ignoring their homework. They weren't doing what they should do. So the rabbi would stop the lesson and he would say, go and learn. You're wasting my time. Go and learn because you should know this. What's fascinating is Jesus is saying this to the religious leaders, the people who had the first 5 books of the Bible memorized, the people who knew God's word like the back of their hands, who could quote it, who knew it better than anybody else. Jesus is treating these PhDs like novices. He's saying, listen, go and learn. You should know this. You haven't done your homework. You got it backwards. You think I want sacrifice, but I actually want mercy. You're trying to get something from these people, but I want you to be giving something to these people. You see, the religious leaders shouldn't have just known this. They should have been living this. They already should have been showing mercy, showing love, showing compassion to the least of these, showing that same level of compassion to the screw-ups, the people who didn't deserve it, because that's what God wanted from them. You see, Jesus isn't concerned with his reputation like the Pharisees were. His mission isn't to elevate himself, rather it's to elevate others. He's not trying to get something, he's trying to give something. He didn't come for the righteous, he came for the sick. Jesus is showing his heart. His heart is for the broken. His heart is for the hurting. His heart is for the lost. And the reality is, even those who appear righteous, they aren't very righteous. The Pharisees thought they didn't need a doctor, but they did. They were in just as much need as the sinners and the tax collectors that they looked at with disdain. See, the reality is we're all sick. We're all in need of a doctor. We're all in need of a Savior. And that's why Jesus came, to show mercy to us, to show love to us, to show grace to us, to show us the proper way to live. And he's frustrated that the people who should have gotten it didn't get it. Jesus is saying that my heart and my desire is for these people that you've ignored, and you should have known that. In fact, you should be living like that already. And listen, church, that's our call today. If you're a follower of Jesus, your job, your role is not to get from others. It's not to jockey in position and move up the social ladder. It's to give to others. See, Jesus used meals to give of himself. Over and over again, we see that throughout the Gospels. Jesus used meals to give of himself. And even his last meal that he shared, where he was about to pay the ultimate price, he used as an opportunity to teach and to give something to his disciples. And we live in a culture that's much different today, but our call is still the same. It's to elevate those around us. It's to show love and compassion to those in our life. And Jesus did that around meals. And he challenged the religious leaders, those who were using meals to get something for themselves, to flip their idea, to flip what they did, and to use meals instead to give something. And we might not use meals the same way today, but I still think the baseline truth, the baseline challenge, the baseline thing that Jesus is trying to get across to us is the same. It's that we shouldn't use our interactions, we shouldn't use our positions, we shouldn't use our job, we shouldn't use our neighborhood, we shouldn't use our friends, we shouldn't use the relationships that we have to get something for ourselves. We should use it to give something to those around us. Because let's be honest, though we might treat meals differently, we're still just like the Pharisees, aren't we? We still try to leverage our position. We still try to leverage people in our life for ourselves, for our own gain, so we can get more money, so we can get more power, so we can get more fame, so we can move up the social ladder, so we can look better than those people over there. We still do the same thing. It might look different. But the call for us, the challenge for us is to not try to gain for ourselves, but to give to those around us. And I think a meal is still a great way of doing that. I think sharing a meal with somebody is still a great way to tear down these walls that we built up, these walls that divide us, and foster community among those that maybe look different than us. And listen, I get it. It's tough. It's awkward because most of us, we don't use meals this way anymore. Most of us, we've gotten accustomed, especially over the past few years, to not having anybody in our house but our own family. I get that it's tough. I get that it's awkward. I get that it's countercultural. But I think we have a great opportunity. I think we have a great opportunity to develop relationships and to give something to those around us through a meal. And so here's my challenge. Here's my challenge to you over the next week, maybe over the next 2 weeks, to invite somebody over for dinner, to bring somebody over for dessert, to share a meal, to share a drink with somebody so that you can not get from them, but that you can give to them. And I know what happened. I know what happened when you heard that. You probably tensed up a little bit. You thought of all the what ifs. What could happen? You thought of the awkward things that could happen. You thought of what it would be like to kind of step outside your comfort zone. You just thought, yeah, I'm not doing that. Great idea, but I'm not interested in that. I'm not doing that. But hear me out. Remember what we've been talking about this past week or past month. Remember that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Remember that God has created you on purpose and for a purpose. Remember that you are in a unique spot to make an impact on somebody in a way that nobody else can. God's created you on purpose, for a purpose. God's placed a harvest all around you of people who are lost, who are hurting, who need love, who need compassion, who need somebody who's going to listen to them, that's going to hear them, that's going to have sympathy on them. There are people all around you that are in desperate need of that. You have the opportunity to go to them, to show them that love, to show them that compassion. This is our mission as Christians, to show God's love and compassion to those around us, not to sit on the sidelines, but to get in the game, not to watch other people harvest the field, but to go harvest it ourselves. And I think sharing a meal is still a great way of doing that. So I want to challenge you. Who are you going to share a meal with? And it's going to require you to step outside your comfort zone. It's going to require you to break social norms a little bit. But one of our values here at Storyline is to pursue our calling over our comfort. Because a good story is told when we include others in our life, not when we live it for ourselves. So don't go for what's comfortable. Go for what's meaningful. Step into the calling that God has for you. Because God is going to tell us sometimes to do things that we're uncomfortable with. But listen, if as a church, if God tells us to do something, we should respond with yes. Because you said so, I will. So who's in your life? Who do you walk by every day? Who do you see every day? Who do you interact with every day? Who do you sit next to at the game? Invite that person. Bring them over for drinks. Bring them over for dinner. Bring them over for desserts. Share a conversation. Show interest in their life. Show them love and compassion. You have no idea the impact that could make. You have no idea how one meal, how one conversation, how one evening of loving those in your life could change everything. The harvest is all around you. It's plentiful, but there's too few workers. You know, one of the things that I've challenged us with over the past 3-4 weeks is to take these top 3 cards and to write down the names of 3 people in your life that don't know Jesus, that you can be praying for. And I hope you've been doing that. If you haven't, it's not too late. You can still download the card. The link's in the description. And you can download that and you can place that somewhere so you can be in prayer for those in your life. And if you've been praying for them, maybe this is your opportunity to kind of take the next step. You've prayed for them a few times and now you can invite them over for a meal. Invite them over for a conversation. It's an opportunity to show love and compassion to that person. So the question for you is, will you go? Will you take that risk? Will you step outside your comfort zone? Will you go to that person? Because listen, very few people are willing to do that. Very few people are willing to live in the calling, the purpose that God has for them. The workers are few. So will you go? Will you go to the people that are lost, that are hurting, that are in desperate need to know that somebody still cares for them? You have an opportunity to make an impact on somebody in a way that nobody else can. So invite them over for dinner, for desserts, for a meal. Incorporate them in your life. Use it as an opportunity not to get something, but to give something. Let's pray.